Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cool and Beautiful Rabbit Hole Lore and Fray, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. So, now that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has been out for a couple of weeks, and we can all kind of admit that, like, the backlash, the YouTuber conspiracies, the nonsense, like, all the weird things that were happening before release, we can all acknowledge that it didn't really impact the game's success at all. This is still a highly successful Pokemon game. I'm sure it sold more than Sword and Shield already. It's going to go on to be one of the best-selling games in the franchise. It's going to be like really well remembered and beloved. I myself really love this game. I'm curious if anyone else is kind of thinking the same thing I am, in that this is, I think, a mark of just how little influence the gaming industry has over the narrative. Namely, like how much can game journalists, YouTubers, and shills smear Nintendo products. And essentially what I've come to realize over the past couple of years is that, like, no matter how hard they try to downplay stuff like ARMS, stuff like Octopath Traveler, stuff like Splatoon, stuff like Pokemon, like, it's always going to come back to the same thing, in that, like, these games being legitimately well-made, interesting, unique titles are going to get a genuine fan base in spite of the weird backlash and the conspiracies. So no matter what these people do, no matter how badly the game sells, or how much they rag on it, or like make up weird conspiracies about it, like, there's going to be someone out there who likes it. And 5 to 10 years later, that person is going to have introduced that game to dozens of other people, right? Like, I myself have done this with stuff like The Wonderful 101 and Bayonetta, right? I have been on the front lines talking about, like, some of these niche, obscure Nintendo games over the past several years. And now, I am in the very early stages of building, like, a real community of people who will actually listen to me talk about things like, say, Codename Steam, or, Dragon Quest V, or Star Fox Zero, or Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. Like, the list really, really goes on and on. Like, I feel like the gaming community at this point is split between, like, two camps. People who, like, blindly believe what gaming journalists say, and then people who actually play the games. And the thing is that first camp is losing more and more influence all the time for a wide range of reasons. For one thing, if you're a YouTuber, if you cover action games, nobody's going to go to you to cover, like, turn-based RPGs, right? If you're Angry Joe, if you've never covered a Nintendo game in your life, if you haven't played Pokemon ever, no one's going to go to you to talk about, like, the problems with the newest Pokemon game. If you're the Act Man and you're pretending that Elden Ring is, like, one of the best things ever made or something, and you try going after Pokemon, it's not going to work. Like, the Pokemon community is going to be following Pokemon YouTubers. And as a result of that, Pokemon YouTubers give a more nuanced opinion on it. They're more willing to talk about, like, a game's positive aspects as well as the negative. And as a result of that, you're going to get a divide between the people who like the game and people who don't like the game. But by its nature, the fact that we're talking about, like, the Pokemon community as a whole, the people who like the game are going to be overwhelmingly more engaged with the community and with the game itself than people who allegedly don't like the game. It's that old, like, thing. It's that old, like, saying, if you hate the game that much, why are you still playing it? And that's the reality we're kind of in, like, in Pokemon, because for the past couple of generations, or in fact, I would argue since Gen 1, we've had these endless wave of people trying to tell us that Pokemon is dead, it's irrelevant, it was never good to begin with, it's time to grow up and play another franchise. But in reality, Pokemon is, and always has been, a top-tier JRPG. It's huge for a reason. It's not only, like, appealing to the masses, it also has, like, a very real hardcore following behind it for a reason. This is one of the best video game franchises ever made. And I'm very, very tired of people not acknowledging it. It's weird to see just the kind of the links people will go to try and denounce these games and dismiss them, like, oh, they're on handhelds, they're not relevant enough to compete with the real games, when in reality they're bigger than essentially everything other than, like, Call of Duty, honestly. And that's just, like, the retail releases. When it comes to, like, merchandising, when it comes to, like, the spin-off materials, like, there's nothing bigger than Pokemon. You can argue Grand Theft Auto is bigger because of, like, oh, Grand Theft Auto 5 sold 100 million units and people are buying shark cards on GTA Online. Pokemon Go alone probably generates more than GTA Online, okay? Like if it doesn't, it's close. You know, Pokemon has like real merchandising potential, it has like real potential for storyline. It's a unique IP that is universally appealing to everyone. You know what I mean? Like its value, its strength as a brand, it cannot be denied. And yet we're constantly seeing these people come out and try their hardest to downplay it. And because they know Pokemon has become a very real threat to the PlayStation world order, to like the third party, to the to like just the gaming establishment, essentially. Because anything that props up Nintendo this much is a major threat. And of course, you're kind of seeing this again with like all the nonstop attack articles on the Switch and the hardware and like upcoming games, like all the weird damage control articles about Tears of the Kingdom and how that's going to like, oh, it couldn't possibly compete with Elden Ring. Like you're seeing all this stuff and it's just not going to stick. That's the reality we're in that like there are so many game journalists spouting like absolute nonsense all the time. Nobody is going to possibly pay attention to all of it. Like these guys, in order to get their narrative across like 10 years ago, these guys had to like corroborate. They had to like strategize. They had their private forums in which they like, you know, decided upon a narrative and like, you know, released a bunch of stories on a bunch of different platforms to try and like control what the masses thought about like, certain situations. But now that like the industry is significantly less controlled with like the collapse of NeoGAF, the rise of Twitter, the more divisive opinions, it's difficult for the mainstream agenda to really take hold anymore, right? Like it's weird to me to see people like pretend to be excited for like the PS5 or Xbox One because there hasn't been anything relevant for those games ever, honestly. Like it's weird to see people pretend to get excited over like Star Ocean or like any of these other fringe IPs that haven't been good ever. You know, like it's weird to see like everyone just do everything they possibly can to hype up every single minor product they possibly could in order to just keep up the illusion for just a little bit longer that Nintendo can't compete with the third parties. They really are desperate to keep up this narrative, and it's not going to work. It hasn't worked. You know, it's been a narrative that's been in decline since like the Wii days, I would say, or maybe ever since the GameCube. Or maybe it never really took off to begin with. Like, the thing is, it never bothered the actual fans. You know, the people who were convinced of that Nintendo was for kids are people who never played a Nintendo console, who never picked up a controller. It's weird seeing people today try to pretend that like the N64 controller was like weird, that there was something unintuitive about it. There was nothing strange about that thing, you know, nothing. If you spent like 5 minutes with it, you would have figured it out immediately. You know, it's absurd seeing the lengths that these people will go to continue justifying their nonsense. So, what can we expect to see in the future? I think we're going to see like more and more ridiculous nonsense. I think these guys, in like losing their power and losing their influence, are going to start like going to more and more extreme lengths to try and keep up the hoax. You know, like we're kind of already seeing this to a certain extent with people like Angry Joe spurging out over like Mario Rabbids winning a Best Strategy Game award, or like, you know, YouTubers like attacking Splatoon 3, or, you know, the whole Fire Emblem Engage, I'm sure is going to get heat from some people. You know, Tears of the Kingdom, I've seen a lot of weird theories about. Like, these people are going to do everything in their power to like downplay every major Nintendo game that comes out, but it's just not going to work. It's not going to be effective at all. We've seen already just how often these guys have to backtrack off their more wild claims. You know, like I saw a video today talking about how Bayonetta 3 was in trouble and it was never going to come out. And it was surreal watching this video when I have played Bayonetta 3 and enjoyed it. So seeing this guy like try to paint this conspiracy that that Nintendo like ruined the game or something, it was just laughable in hindsight. It was really really funny. And more we're seeing situations like that. Like the Pretendos are walking right into these situations. Oh, they haven't released Tears of the Kingdom news in a while. Is the game in trouble? No. The game looks great. Oh, but it can't compete with Elden Ring. It's going to outsell Elden Ring quite handedly, I would say. Oh, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it's broken. I picked up the game like 3 weeks after launch. Never had a glitch. Never. And I've had people tell me there were glitches happening all the time on screen. Never saw them. Never. There was nothing wrong with Scarlet and Violet. These guys have reached the point where they're straight up making things up in order to justify their nonsense. You know, other than like the mythical glitches and bugs in a oh, actually there are bugs in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Bug type Pokemon, excuse me. Is that what you're talking about? There are too many bugs? There are too many Scythers running around? I did see a lot of Scythers, so maybe that was the problem. I don't know, but I am just appalled by the lengths that these people went to try and downplay this great video game. And I'm wondering what this year, 2023, will have in store for us when it comes to the Pretendo narratives.